Hello, I'd like to do a talk about what I learned from the great Porthos. Porthos was a little ginger cat that we got a long time ago. He's gone now, and he was given to us by a friend of my daughter Rachel's, and we got the mother cat, whose name was Tutti Frutti, and she was a tortoiseshell mottled coloured cat, and she was pretty wild, and the baby cat, which was Porthos, was pretty wild too. And when they first arrived here, we got her in a cage because she'd been fixed up by the previous owners, and she still had stitches in. And Porthos was a wild little cat. He was very tiny, and he was a kitten, but he was very wild. And they ate wild rabbits and things on the farm where they lived. And Porthos wouldn't come near us, but he adored his mum, and while his mum was in the cage, Porthos slept around the cage, but he wouldn't let anyone in the family near him. And he was quite vicious, and he was tiny, little wee baby, So he was a really rough little cat. Anyway, one night, I think it was the third night we had him here, mother cat was still in the cage, and Porthos, I went out in the lounge at about 11 o'clock at night, and Porthos, after days and days and days of rejecting our friendliness, Porthos finally came trotting over to me, this gorgeous little kitten, and then he walked up and stood right in front of me, and I crouched down to look at him, and he rolled over on his back, exposing his little tummy to me, and then he meowed and cried, and so I rubbed his little tummy, and from then on he was our friend. And that was really cool. It was a wonderful little cat. It was Grace's cat, and Grace named Porthos off from the Three Musketeers, from the Waltons. She watched the Waltons, and in the Waltons had a guinea pig called Porthos that fell off the cabinet and died. And Grace named her cat after that guinea pig. When he was younger, he climbed up a big, huge tree of ours when he was a kitten, and he fell down and banged his head. And he was dazed for a while, and we always thought that it affected his rest of his life. Porthos used to do what we call moments. He'd come up, and he'd put his forehead up against your forehead, and he'd just lean his head against you, and he'd sit there for quite a while, just doing that, just resting his head on your head. And we always called it moments, and when guests would come up, like Tracy came over from when she was in Wanganui, and my daughter, and he leaned his head against her head, and it was a greeting sort of thing. He was a gorgeous cat, and that was, yes, good moments. One day I was in the section, I was reading a book, and Porthos was out there, and he climbed up a plank, and it was on an angle, and he climbed up the plank, and he and Porthos was on the plank, and he saw a bird, and he decided he wanted to get to the bird, and he walked up the plank, and then he just stepped off the plank because he was too busy looking at the ball of the bird, and he fell. And I laughed at Porthos, and I thought that was very funny. And then I stopped for a moment and thought, no, and then Porthos carried on trying to stalk the bird. And it made me think about people, and how at times we make a mistake, and we could get on if people didn't laugh at us and make fun of us, and we could actually do the job, whatever it was we wanted to do. And if we made a little mistake, but people tend to, I remember all through my childhood, a lot of people laughed at me, making fun of me and stuff like that, and it was very bad for my confidence. And so that's what kind of happens, your confidence gets hurt, and it tends to pull you back, and you pull you within yourself. And so I thought of that, and I thought of Porthos, and he sort of taught me that little lesson. And I thought, well, if I didn't laugh, so I voluntarily tried very hard, but from then on, whenever people make mistakes in front of me, even though it might seem funny, I don't laugh. I try my hardest not to laugh at them. And instead I might go over and pat them on the shoulder and say, well done, keep trying. And so, that was it. Another thing Porthos did when he was little was, a bird was coming over, and he was really tiny, and he was sitting on my lap out in the section, and he stood up, and he waved his paws in the air, and he was trying to catch the bird in his paws, like that. And the bird was way up in the sky, but Porthos couldn't tell the difference between far away and close up. And that was very funny. I asked Jim this morning what he thought about Porthos, and something he remembered. And he said he remembered how loyal Porthos was. If you pushed Porthos away, or if he'd done something bad and you pushed him away, he'd always come back up for a snuggle. And Porthos was very forgiving, and I love that very much from him. And when Porthos did that, and he was very forgiving, he taught me that I could be more forgiving. And that's what I felt from Porthos. I felt, it was really good and really sweet. And so those are some of the things that I learned from a gorgeous little ginger cat called Porthos, who's not with us now. He disappeared about a year ago, and we all greatly miss him. And so there's a bit of a tribute to him and how a cat can affect your life and give you something to think about. Little lessons. We get little lessons in all our animals and in our lives. So I just wanted to mention that. Thank you for listening.